What is up, my Squirtleites? It is I, your king, welcoming you back to more Let's Play Destiny. We could be pedantic and call it Let's Play Destiny 2, but at this point, I think we can just call this Destiny. This is a monolithic franchise that has been going on for 8 years, and Destiny 2 has been around a lot longer than its predecessor. It's Destiny at this point. Welcome back, everybody. It has been over 3 years since I released the last episode. Episode 175 was the final one, uploaded on October 19th, 2019. But this is episode 175, and you might ask why. Well, that's because that last episode has been deemed irrelevant by the passage of time. It has been deemed irrelevant by the fact that all of the episodes that came after it didn't end up coming out. The fact that it is now 2023, at the time you guys are getting this video, there'll have been 4 more major expansions, major content drops that have come out for this game between this episode and the last. At the time I'm recording it, I'm still waiting on that 4th expansion to come out, but I digress. We have a lot to discuss, though, in regards to this game, because so much has happened between then and now. And this episode is more or less just going to be an explainer before we get back into things. So the last episode that you guys can actually see, was the ending of the Forsaken campaign. That was more or less a return to form for Destiny. Destiny has been through a whole lot of rocky phases, and we've already covered it here in the series in its entirety. Destiny 1 was up and down, but that whole Let's Play took place in basically its last heyday, right in the preceding months before Destiny 2 launched, which Destiny 1 was pretty much left in a very good state. Then Destiny 2 came out. It was garbage. Anyone who tells you it wasn't, they are a history revisionist. That's not true. It was awful. It was bad. It was designed bad. It took so much away from what made Destiny good in the first place and was just a very boring, very flawed, very generic, just spongy. I mean, there's so many criticisms I can make about the way Destiny 2 launched. It then got a DLC called Curse of Osiris, which was even worse and even compounded the issues that the vanilla release had. Then it got the Warmind DLC, which was a little bit better because it showed that they were starting to shift in the right direction, but it still had a long way to go. Then we got Forsaken, which was effectively a return to form. It brought back so much of what made Destiny 1 successful and basically moved Destiny 2 in that direction almost entirely. There were still a couple of things that weren't all the way there yet and needed to be fleshed out over time, but for the most part, it was a return to form. Forsaken was incredibly good, but we've only looked at the campaign in this Let's Play. We haven't seen any more than that. Now, here's the thing. It's a good thing that I actually got that campaign done, because as of now, that campaign is no longer in the game. Warmind is no longer in the game. Curse of Osiris is no longer in the game. There are actually quite a few things that are no longer in the game, but luckily, for the most part, we've covered all of those things. There is a couple of big exceptions, but we'll talk about those in a bit. A lot has changed, and I can thankfully still continue, kind of pick up where we left off with Forsaken, but it's complicated. This series is going to be a long one still. Like, I'm not kidding when I say we might go another 175 episodes, possibly even more than that, considering how long this Let's Play is going to take. But I'm committed at this point, because if I hadn't made myself clear in other videos up to this point, Destiny is an incredibly special game to me. It's probably the only multiplayer-focused game I would consider one of my top 5 favorites of all time. I absolutely adore this game. I love everything about it. No, well, okay, I shouldn't say everything, but I love it as an experience as a whole. It's a wonderful, wonderful game. There's so much that I appreciate about it, and I want to take this Let's Play to convey that fully. I mean, I want to give this game the time and the attention that I gave to games like Okami, like Shadow of the Colossus, like Ori and the Will of the Wisps, some of my other all-time favorite games. I love this game. But there's a lot to be said about it, and it is a little bit complicated, so I'm going to try to take things slow. Now, let's start by going over why we're at the character screen in the first place. This Warlock right here is the very same Warlock that I recorded all the way up to this point with in the Let's Play. Destiny 1 and Destiny 2. Very same Warlock. We have been going since literally this character awoke, the ghost woke him up, made it into the Cosmodrome, and the game began. I'm not going to be continuing with this character anymore. And the main reason for that is because of those episodes that never actually came out. After I recorded the last episode and the campaign concluded, I actually recorded something like 50 or 60 more episodes of content that came out throughout the course of Forsaken. And I ended up having to scrap all of those because of the muddied nature of it all, and because of Bungie's new content schedule that made it very hard to keep up with what they were doing. If you don't know, with Destiny 2, when it launched, like I said, they released Curse of Osiris and Warmind with it, which was incredibly similar to what they did with Destiny 1, where they released the main game and then they released 2 quote-unquote major DLCs to coincide with it. Both of these times, this content structure has failed. Now, in Destiny 1, after that content structure failed, they kind of replaced it with nothing. They just made the expansions good, and that was it. In Destiny 2, they took a different approach. They started what is known as a seasonal content model, and that might sound... well, obviously, lots of games do that now. But this was back in 2018. And in 2018, seasonal content models weren't nearly as common as they are now. And with Forsaken, there came 3 seasons that came after the fact. The first season was known as Black Armory. The second, or I guess you could say Season of the Forge is what it was technically called. Then there was Season of the Drifter, also known as Joker's Wild. And then finally, there was Season of Opulence, which, or... I don't even know what actually its other name was. But these 3 seasons all came with not quite fully DLC-sized content drops, but like a good chunk of content, like another 20 to 30 hours more of content, which you might think that's a lot of content. But in the context of this game, it's actually not that much. But they were still sizable enough that they kept people busy for a couple more months while they waited for the next one. Essentially, Destiny was able to move into a very steady content structure, but because I wasn't used to this at the time, and because Bungie wasn't used to this at the time, it was a bit rocky and messy at first, and because of that, a lot of those episodes did not turn out well. A lot of things were done out of order, and I didn't like them, and I ended up just deleting them. Now, it's been 4 years, and the content structure is mostly set in stone. It's here to stay. I mean, there might still be deviations. In fact, right now, there have already been talks amongst Bungie to change the content structure a little bit, but for the most part, from Forsaken onward, the content structure has remained the same. And because of that, there is a whole lot of this giant back catalog of content that I can now go back to and start fresh, basically in the same way that I did with Destiny 1 when we started the Let's Play at the beginning. So, to experience all of that, because I kind of can't experience some of those things again on this Warlock, we have a new character, and you've probably already seen this character if you watched my video, How to Get Into Destiny. This was the character that I used to play through the whole beginner quest in the Cosmodrome with Shawhan and all that kind of stuff. I use this character, and the reason I am switching to Hunter is because Hunter is my main. It has always been my favorite class. Warlock has always been my secondary, and that's kind of why I picked it in the first place, because when I'm playing on my own time, I'm playing as my Hunter. It's nice to be able to go to this Let's Play and play as a secondary character, but at this point, I think we've done enough with the Warlock that I think it's time we switch to Hunter. Because this is the one I can speak the most on. This is the class that is my absolute favorite. It's just a joy for me to play. I've never gotten tired of it. It has been my main for about 7 years. 7 years strong, I would say. Pretty much since the Taken King came out. I've always been a Hunter main, and I'm just going to continue that spirit here today. So let's jump on in. And there is a few things that we need to talk about. I'm not going to go into all the systems today. We're not going to be talking about weapon and armor systems in depth just yet. We're not even going to talk about subclass systems just yet. We're going to keep this very minimal for the time being, not unlike how it was when Forsaken first came out, because a lot of these systems didn't come out until Shadowkeep and Beyond Light and the Witch Queen, which are the 3 other ones that I haven't yet covered, and probably by the time this video's out, Lightfall will have also launched. Who knows how that's going to go, but here is a look at the new map screen. You might notice some things missing, and you might notice some new things. So we have since lost Mercury as a destination, Mars, kind of. It's actually technically right there, you'll see, but it's a little bit complicated. It's not what you think it is. It's not a patrol destination that you can go to anymore. Well, it'll all make sense once we get to the Witch Queen campaign, but for right now, consider Mars as not a part of this map. We also lost Titan, sadly. We lost Io, and I do believe... Oh, yeah, and we lost the Tangled Shore from the Forsaken campaign, but we did not lose the Dreaming City, which you guys actually haven't really seen yet because it was only briefly shown in a couple of missions in the campaign. We still have Nessus. We still have the European Dead Zone. We have since added the Cosmodrome, which made its return from Destiny 1. It's a little bit different. It's got a few additions and stuff like that, and we're going to take the time to go over it, but it is back kind of as the beginner location for the game for anyone who's just starting. And then we have a Return of the Moon. Again, not entirely what you think, though. It is a revamped version of the Moon. Then we have the Mars, which is also the Throne World. This one's also complicated. We'll get into it later. And then there's Europa, another new destination. We also have the Tower and the Helm, which is also a little bit complicated. And we'll get into all of that in a minute. But before we jump into the Tower itself, let me explain Destiny's content model really quickly so you can understand where everything went and why everything has changed so much. So with the release of Forsaken, like I said, it was a seasonal content model. These things just kind of added upon itself, just continued to compound and compound and compound. Then we got Shadowkeep, with which came the Moon. This also had things added to it that just compounded and compounded and compounded. By that point, the typical download size of Destiny was similar to what Call of Duty Warzone players have to deal with now. I'm talking 200 gigabytes. And actually, I might be a little out of date on that. Warzone might be even worse than that now. But it was pretty bad. There was a lot of bloat in this game. And it was actually running like garbage. Even on SSDs, it would take a while for menus to load. And there would be a lot of crashes. There was a lot of server syncing issues. And just so many problems going on with the game. So Bungie decided, and I'm not rationalizing this decision, I'm just saying this was their way of fixing it, was to sunset a lot of the, or as they call it sunsetting, but effectively remove the chunks of the game that were being used the least, which was Io, Titan, Mercury, Mercury and Mars were the 4 locations that they got rid of right then. Not the Tangled Shore just yet. So those were all deleted with the advent of Beyond Light, where we got Europa. A lot of people were upset about this. Personally, I wasn't too peeved by it because while I liked a lot of those locations aesthetically, they didn't really do anything else for me, so I was kind of but that's what happened effectively. Not only that, though, but all of the seasonal content that came with those seasons, so Season of the Forge, Season of Opulence, Season of the Forge had literal forges where you could go and forge weapons. Season of Opulence had this place called the Menagerie. There was a couple that were added in Shadowkeep as well. All of these seasonal content pieces were also deleted from the game. And at the time, it made the game actually feel incredibly barren. Now, since then, they have repopulated the game with things. But the stuff that hasn't remained has been, consistently, has been the seasonal stuff. So the stuff that we get every 3 months, and some of this stuff will actually release with the new expansion, still gets deleted. So everything that came out over the course of the season of, with Beyond Light, that came out over the course of the year, that is gone. Also, they deleted the Tangled Shore later on as well. But aside from that, everything else has remained. And in fact, after the Tangled Shore was gotten rid of, Bungie did announce that they are no longer going to be getting rid of that sorts of content. They're not going to be getting rid of locations anymore. Everything on this map is here to stay. But of course, there's even exceptions to that. The seasonal content still doesn't fully stay. In fact, if we click on the helm really quickly, you will notice a couple of things. You'll firstly notice something like this, like Salvage and Salvation, for instance. This is a part of seasonal content. That will be gone when Lightfall comes out. If I go into my milestones, you can see Extraction Protocol, complete the mission hierarchy on Europa. That is also part of seasonal content. It will be gone when Lightfall comes out. You also got another one in Season of the Risen. Progress through the free campaign introduction of the Witch Queen to unlock. That will also be gone with Lightfall. It's really kind of complicated, and I hate how complicated it sounds, but effectively all you need to know is that expansion content is permanent. Seasonal content is temporary. Why didn't I just lead with that? It's so much more easy to grasp. I want to be incredibly transparent here when talking about Destiny. Destiny is not for everyone. Destiny is not, it does not have a business model that is going to work with everybody. In fact, if I didn't love this game so much, and even as I do, I am incredibly critical of this game's business model because it has a lot of issues. A lot of issues. In fact, in my opinion, the only reason you should ever play Destiny is if it works within what you consider your value proposition. A lot of people will tell you that $60 is worth it for a 20-hour game, right? A lot of people will say that that's not worth it unless the game is 40 hours, 60 hours, 80 hours, 100 hours. I have played, and there's a website that tells you how many hours of Destiny you've played. It adds it up across all your characters, all your accounts, etc. I have put over 4,000 hours into this game, while also spending close to about $300 to $400 on it over the course of 8 years. A lot of people will hear that number, $400 and $300 to $400, and go, that's insane. But when I equate it to how many hours I've put in, this game has still been a better value proposition than any other game that I have played in like the last decade. And I'm serious when I say that. Maybe Skyrim is like the only one I can think of where I've had a better time to dollar ratio than Destiny. And that's only because I'm able to get Skyrim for like 10, 20 bucks and mod the crap out of it. This game is not for everybody. It is hard to get into. It is expensive to get into. And honestly, I would not blame you for a second if you don't want to touch this thing with a 10-foot pole. But it is not the game's quality that is the issue. It is, again, that investment, that getting into, that understanding why this game is so good and wanting to go out of your way to experience it. A lot of people will tell you, just go play Warframe. As somebody who has played Warframe, that game is no substitute for this. It is not even close. It doesn't have near the game feel, near the wonderful, wonderful gameplay, the catharsis that I get out of playing Destiny every day, the satisfaction that this gameplay delivers me. It just, nothing else compares. But like I said, that's up to you. That's up to you. I'm not here to convince you to play it, but at the very least, would you be willing to come on this journey with me once again? Before I call this an episode, and I know you're probably going, but there's so many other things to talk about. This can all wait. We're going to wait a little bit longer. The only thing we're going to do before we end this episode is take a look at the tower really quickly, because there are some things worth discussing here. And this is, I think, the firstly and most important thing to go over, just so that it's all familiar once we get into the Let's Play and we come back to the tower and we see how things have changed and what's been added and what we're actually dealing with here. Because for the most part, the tower actually looks the same as it was when I last left you guys. At least in terms of its layout, it's mostly the same. The vendors are slightly different, and I do want to go over a couple of things in that regard. So, first thing you need to know, and ignore Mr. Iron Banner right here in the front, Mr. Lord Saladin. He used to host Iron Banner up there, up on the balcony up there. Now he hosts it down here. This is just an event that happens to be going on the week that I am recording this. I am going to be ignoring him entirely. So we still have our Cryptarch, Master Rahul, but he has a couple of different purposes. So, do you remember the spider from the Tangled Shore from, well, not that long ago? He used to be able to exchange materials for you for things like the Glimmer and the like. This is now Master Rahul's job because the Tangled Shore is gone. We also have a material exchange here for things called Enhancement Prisms and Ascendant Shards. Do you remember Enhancement Cores? Enhancement Cores are now a base currency. Enhancement Prisms are kind of like the second level of currency, and Ascendant Shards are like the third level. So if this is Charmander, this is Charmeleon, and this is Charizard. Does that make sense? It'll make more sense when you actually know what they do a little bit later on. You can also get Ascendant Alloys. This is for weapon crafting, which we'll be getting into a little bit later. That's all you really need to know right now. Oh, I should add one more thing. Destination materials, which were a very prominent part of the game. These were things like, I'm trying to think of, like spin metal on the Cosmodrome, helium filaments on the moon. I'm trying to think, was it Relic Iron that was on the Mars in Destiny 1? And Spirit Bloom on Venus. Those were destination materials, and they were always kind of a part of the game's economy. Well, Bungie, in fact, very recently, not too long before I put this video out, I'm making this video, completely did away with those. So now all they reward is Glimmer, which has always been a thing, is a part of the currency system. And if you have any leftover destination materials, he can exchange those for more Glimmer. So really all you have to worry about in this game is Glimmer, Legendary Shards, and Bright Dust, although we'll get into Bright Dust a little bit later, and reluctantly so. We have the Gunsmith over here, Banshee, still here, as always, except for now you have a rank system. Much like you did in Destiny 1, you have reputation systems in this game. And with every reputation gain, you get an engram. It's not quite as flashy as it was in Destiny 1, where you got like a whole package with like 3 or 4 things in it and a really unique gun. It's kind of just... like, I think it's like you can get a mod that you don't have, you get a weapon, and then you get maybe an enhancement core or 2. But he actually gives you specific rewards depending on how much you rank up. You can also even prestige it and then go through this whole path again, although I do believe you can't get the final reward more than once. He's also got bounties, which I am actually going to be grabbing for future episodes. There are, with every vendor, 4 daily bounties, and then you can grab up to 5 repeatable bounties. Now, the daily bounties are the best. They have the highest experience yield. They give you rank progress and an enhancement core, but the repeatable bounties are only there for additional experience. Now, this is done on purpose because... well, you look at the glimmer cost, it's much higher for 1. This is so you can't farm these bounties absolutely endlessly and break the experience system. They want specifically to give you diminishing returns so that you're not going to waste your entire life just trying to experience grind, because this game is not rewarding if you do that. You also have a couple of weapon mods. These are very standard weapon mods. These used to be consumable items back in the day, but they were made into permanent mods. You can grab these here if you don't already have them. If you're a veteran player, you are guaranteed to, but if you are not, this is where you get them. These change, I believe, daily. These 4. And then you have upgrade modules. These are what basically make up the infusion system. If you remember the infusion system, it was if you have a weapon that's at a certain level and you find another weapon that you don't like but is a higher level, you can infuse the lower level weapon into the higher level weapon to make it the same level as the higher level weapon. Upgrade modules are how you do that. You can only hold up to 25 at a time. Quest, we'll get into that later. He also does keep randomly rolled weapons, 5 a week, or 6 a week, excuse me. I apparently can't count. Not too dissimilar from vendors in Destiny 1, although I guess it's not as many weapons as a lot of the Destiny 1 vendors had, but all of these weapons at the gunsmith are only going to be world drops, essentially. So these are weapons that come out of basic legendary engrams. They are not tied to Vanguard, Crucible, Gambit, etc. And on top of all of that, you can also pick up a static roll of what is known as the Mida mini tool, although there is a much better variant of this that you can get from other means that we'll have to talk about in a little bit, although that actually might not still be available when this video comes out. If not, grab that. It has applications that are related to Mida multi-tool that I talked about earlier on in the series. Then we have our vaults, standard vaults, very much the same as they've always been. They are up to 600 slots now. I mean, personally, that's a ton, don't get me wrong, but personally, if you are filling that, you are a hoarder. Then we have the Exotic Archive. Now, this is incredibly important. The Exotic Archive, because of all of the content that has been sunset in this game, this holds all of the exotics that are no longer obtainable through their original means. So these are exotics that will not be sold by Xur. These are exotics that you had to get through specific quests or by doing very specific activities, things along those lines. So for instance, a good example, I talked before about Season of the Forge, Black Armory. Le Monarch, Jotun, and I believe Izanagi's Burden were all specifically only tied to that season. They could only be gotten from that activity. That activity is completely gone, therefore, you can only get them here. Now, to get them, it's actually a pretty high material cost normally. You have to get what's called an Exotic Cipher, of which you can only get 1 a year. You get that either through the season pass or you get it through Xur, through a quest that you have to do. Then it's a very high cost of Glimmer, a high cost of legendary shards, and 2 Ascendant shards. So getting these exotics is an investment. It takes time, but it's also very important to know exactly what you're getting into, and I'm actually going to take some time to explain all of these exotics later on. We'll go over these a little bit more. There's even, up to this point, there's even Witch Queen ones, because these were the season pass exotics, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But on top of that, there's also legacy gear. Now, these were all very special weapons that you could get through specific quests, in particular. So every single season since Forsaken came out, there has always been a weapon that is... It's basically the reward of that season. You try to get it, and you get it. how do I explain this? It's basically the pursuit, if that makes sense. I believe they're actually called pursuit weapons. They were originally called pinnacle weapons, but they changed to pursuit weapons. Pinnacle weapons, which you see have the gray triangle in the corner here, are all what is called sunset, meaning they cannot be leveled past their 1350 power level. They are stuck at the base cap, the base power cap, which means they cannot be used in higher level content. Why was this done? It's because a lot of these pinnacle weapons were incredibly overpowered. They were basically as good or better than exotics because of power creep and because they tried to have unique perks, and those unique perks just made them a little too strong. For instance, this weapon right here, the Recluse, had a perk known as Master of Arms. It basically boosted damage just for free all the time, and the boost was insane, and it worked for headshot and body damage. It was just stupid. Absolutely stupid. Completely broken gun. They had to nerf it, and then they had to sunset it because these guns were causing so many problems. I mean, they kind of were the reason sunsetting happened in the first place, just because these guns completely outshone the rest of the competition, and you had to use them in effectively everything, particularly the Crucible. But then they eventually moved on to what are known as pursuit weapons. Now, these weapons aren't nearly as strong, but they are still pretty good because they're usually able to get 2 perks in each column, and these perks are curated to work with the gun's specific strengths. Now, not all of them are winners. I would say like these first 3 here are winners, but the rest of these have been kind of hit and miss and not so great. And there's also another one that you can even get this season, but these can all be gotten in the same area as well. You notice that instead of an exotic cipher, though, you need enhancement prisms and a single ascendant shard. All right. Now we move on to Lord Shaxx, the Crucible vendor. Very much the same concept as it was with Banshee. You got your bounties, you got your rank rewards, but, well, I mean, he does have focus decoding as well, so if you have any engrams you grab up here, you can, if you would like, focus them here, although it is for a somewhat considerable cost. 50 legendary shards is actually a lot of shards to spend to try to get a very specific weapon. That's not to say you can't get these weapons through other means, because they drop at the end of Crucible matches, but they are there as well. And then the Vanguard has a very similar setup, but for Vanguard weapons and gear, and we can show that really quickly. Now, the armor in particular is only going to be this season's armor. It's not going to be a previous season's armor. It's always going to be this one, so you are kind of locked out if you didn't get it beforehand. Although you can see that the Vanguard does not have focused decoding, at least not yet. I have heard that it is in the works, and it honestly might be out by the time this video gets to you guys. Couple more things to show. I know. This is quite complicated, and it's a long episode. It's just an explainy episode, but don't worry, we're going to be getting into the actual game proper in the next one, I promise you. So let's head down this way. There are a couple things I want to make note of as we go down here. So Hawthorne is up there. She's still the clan lady. The only thing that they have added to her between then and now is that you can buy raid banners from her, which, if you don't know, are banners that you can put down in certain endgame activities to immediately fill up all of your ammo and your super and ability energy. This is basically just so that you can start a raid encounter without having to wait for everything to regenerate. So just makes things go a lot quicker, and everyone can use it. Everyone in your fire team. Then we have Ikora down here. Now, Ikora is the subclass lady. This is where you're able to get your aspects and your grenades and all the sorts of things that you haven't had unlocked. So, for instance, if I go into my grenades, I have 4 of them unlocked on this subclass, but I don't have these ones. They cost 3,000 glimmer each. So it's kind of a process unlocking all of them. You got to just continue to rack up the glimmer to buy everything. Now, while most of the abilities aren't so bad, the aspects, and I don't think the aspects are expensive either, but the fragments are incredibly expensive. They're 25,000 glimmer each, which means the most that you can buy at any one time is 10 with maxed out glimmer. So those are things that you're going to have to invest in for each subclass, but once you have all of those, you take them, you go over to this little thing here, you get a prompt to meditate, and then you unlock the ability. That's all Ikora does in this game. She really doesn't do a whole lot else, but I guess it's still better than what she was doing before, which was nothing. Now we're going to head down here. We got 2 more vendors to meet. We have an alternative to Banshee down here known as Ada. Now, she was the vendor for the Black Armory, the Season of the Forge, but she is now the armor synthesis vendor. So with these bounties here, these 5 bounties, you can unlock synthesis materials, which allow you to unlock more transmog options. She also has a specific armor set on sale, that you can buy that has randomized rolls, although the perks are usually pretty bad, or I guess I should say the stats. So not usually worth getting unless you want one of these specifically for a transmog option. But then she also has her own specific set of mods available. Now these are what is known as combat mods. Now these can be slotted into any of your armor, and in particular you've got mods like this, which are special, that are meant for builds. But then you have these, like the ability to reload bows faster and bow ammo finder, I guess, if you need that. It's for finding heavy ammo for a bow, which I believe there's one in the game. Not a very good mod, if I'm being honest, but any mod that can be slotted into your armor can be found at Ada, and they're 10,000 glimmer each. You do want to check back with her every single day for any mods you might not have, because there are so many in the game. It's honestly kind of hard to keep track of them all. In fact, because there are so many, I'm probably going to have to go over them on my main account just so that I can talk about them all, because this character doesn't have nearly enough. Then we have the Drifter. We had the Crucible vendor. We had the Vanguard vendor. This is the Gambit vendor. Gambit was a new game mode that was released with Forsaken that I never was able to go over. I will go over it in due time in this particular series, I promise. Don't you worry. But for right now, this is Gambit. Gambit is its own activity. It's got its own bounties here, and then it also has its own decoding screen. Honestly, if you're going to be going and focusing anything as far as these regular vendors go, I would go with the Gambit weapons way over the Crucible weapons. The Crucible weapons are all kind of usually trash, and the Gambit weapons are usually actually really good, but that's because people tend to invest into Gambit a lot less than they do Crucible. I'm actually going to fast travel back to the main area because I still have a couple more things to go over. There's still, even while I was trying to keep this episode short and simple, it ends up turning out too long. I am so sorry. I knew this was going to be bad, but I wanted to make this one episode so that you guys can just move on if you want to. We still have the Postmaster here. Very simple, not much to be said. The Eververse still exists. Yes, I know, and in fact, it's bigger and I was going to say better, but I'm saying that with massive air quotes. Better than ever. So everything that can be purchased within the game is here in the Eververse. And I hate going over it, but I need to go over it for the sake of transparency. So right here, we have Bright Dust, things that you can buy with Bright Dust. We also have them on this screen as well. These are all items that can be bought by using Bright Dust. As you can see, I have very little of because, well, this is kind of a brand new account. This is the place to get new shaders, to get ornaments for your armor and weapons, new ghost shells, sparrows, all sorts of things, emotes, things like that. Although, personally, I would avoid all of these things at all costs with Bright Dust because you can honestly just get them through random engrams. I mean, the chances are really low, but it's better to just kind of let that all rack up because these things get expensive with Bright Dust. Personally, I only spend Bright Dust on ornaments and shaders, and that is it. I just want to be able to look pretty, and this is the way I can do it without having to spend actual money. Bright Dust is gotten from various activities, particularly seasonal activities, and from certain types of bounties. But then we actually have the paid-for stuff, okay? This is the seasonal offerings. This stuff right here is specifically tied to Season of the Seraph, which, as you can see, is the one going on at the time that I am recording this. You'll start with, you got like a starter bundle, whatever, stupid, waste of time. You have a couple of armor bundles, which I think if you're ever going to spend money, this is probably the best use of it, although it's still stupid. They usually tend to keep certain things out of these particular offerings. Like you got finishers in here, and the odd legendary ornament or two. Got some sparrows and ships and things like that. A couple of emotes. Don't ever waste money on those. And then you have the ornaments back here, which armor is usually 600 and weapons are 700. The only exception is this one here. This is out of the ordinary. They're almost always 700. The reason this is out of the ordinary, though, is because this is tied to an actual Nerf gun product that Bungie is selling on their store right now. And if you buy that product, you get a code with it that gives it to you for free. So it's kind of like a slightly more special ornament to have. It kind of shows that you paid for that Nerf thing, but whatever. But on top of that, and one thing that this is probably the only nice thing I can say about the Eververse today that I couldn't say back then. There is an archive. If you are missing any cosmetics that you, for some reason, want to drop money into getting because you missed it, because you weren't playing the game at the time that it came out, this is where you find it, in the archive. And some of these things can still appear for Bright Dust. Don't worry. Bright Dust is not only current seasonal stuff. You'll occasionally get things that are old. Like, for instance, these two right here are actually from last season, Season of the Plunder. And this one right here is from a season that was actually 2 years ago, all the way back in Shadowkeep. So some of these old things will still appear. Don't worry. But you can kind of just scroll through here. There's a ton of pages of stuff of all of the different things you can buy if you should so desire to use silver. I always hate doing it, but occasionally I will end up dropping a little bit into it because I am fiercely and horrifically addicted to this game. I do not recommend doing it. It's bad. It's dumb. It's a waste of money. But all of the ornaments that have ever come out can at the very least, be viewed in this menu should you ever want to look for something in particular. Like, for instance, if we were to go into the weapon ornaments, probably my favorite ornament of all time is the Austroraptor for Hawkmoon, which is this one right here with its laser sight. I absolutely love it. And I guess if it ever does happen to come up for Bright Dust, I will be snagging that post-haste. That is the Eververse. It's still the cosmetic shop. It's still microtransaction-y. It still feels gross that it's in this game that already costs a lot of money, and I'm not a big fan of it, but it's there. And it's worth discussing before we go any further because, again, I want anybody who watches this series to make informed decisions about Destiny before they buy it, and then they go, you know what, I regretted this. Amanda Holiday is here. She is the shipwright. She is still exactly as useless as she was when this game launched. She sells really bad ships and really bad sparrows that you will never, ever buy. However, there is one new person over here, and that is this guy. This is Saint 14, who you've probably never seen before. Although, well, actually, that's not true, because if you were watching my Curse of Osiris portion of the Let's Play, we saw his corpse, but we never actually saw him. He's back. We were able to bring him back over the course of the season. It was Season of the Dawn. Back during Shadowkeep, we were able to bring him back and resurrect him. He is now the one who runs Trials of Osiris. It used to be Brother Vance, who was a character that was on Mercury in Destiny 2, and he was in the Reef in Destiny 1. Now it is Saint 14. He runs Trials of Osiris because Osiris is his boyfriend. And he gives out rank rewards. He gives out things that you can focus. This is basically the exact same as focusing. You get them through engrams through Trials of Osiris, and then you also have a quest that you need to go through to actually get into Trials of Osiris because they want to keep out Smurfers effectively. So you need to hit a certain power level, play enough Crucible, defeat enough people in the Crucible, then they'll let you actually play it. This is an endgame Crucible activity, PvP activity that only appears on weekends and not even every weekend. In fact, it won't be this weekend because they do not run Trials of Osiris at the same time as Iron Banner. They are both endgame PvP activities, and they don't want them conflicting with one another. That was a lot to explain. I know. A lot. This game has changed a bunch. So many things to go over, and it's really the thing that I was regretting the most about bringing back this series. And for the most part, I've gotten it all off my chest on this one video, which is good, because now we can get into the other 100+ episodes of actual content in this game that we have been missing out on. Destiny is, I mean, I said it before, it's a monolith. It's this massive game. And oh yeah, that's another thing. Last time we looked at the Traveler, it was kind of in disrepair and kind of broken up, wasn't it? Yeah, now it's all put together again. So much has changed. So we have so much to go over. And we are going to still be here in the tower at the start of the next episode, but that's because there is something I need to do when we start Forsaken proper. I need to actually explain what Forsaken, Shadowkeep, what all of these expansions are like in 2023, because even that has changed a little bit since their release, because things have been sunset, because things that were in those expansions are no longer obtainable. It gets a little bit more complicated, and you need to understand what you're actually getting with each and every single one. But for right now, I think that's it for this first episode back. This extra long episode that is not going to hopefully be indicative of most of the episodes in this series. This series should, for the most part, be 15 to 20 minute episodes. It really shouldn't be all that bad. And hopefully that's going to start with the next one, because that's it for this. Guys, thank you all so very much for watching this first episode back, episode 175 of Let's Play Destiny. I hope you all enjoyed it very, very much, and I will see you all in the next one.